Hello, my name is Bill Haley, and this is for Haley 2024 The Movement's Government Reform Ideas. This video is going to be on securing the U.S. Constitution from a bad amendment process. So, fringe group or open immigration coming in and amending our Constitution with not that many people. So, I put out a 6-minute long video. I'm going to have about a 20-minute video out there as well. This one's going to be about a 45 to 50-minute video. I'm going to target that time frame for this one. Really going more in depth, talking about a little bit more, and really going over some case studies, a lot of strategy, and a lot of different things from the past. So let's go over it. But just because it hasn't been done before, doesn't mean somebody can't do it now. Our Constitution is vulnerable from attack from foreign foes or from fringe groups within America. Let's go over the numbers to let me show you what I'm talking about. Again, I'm going to take a breath on this one and really sit there and explain a lot more than I did on my 6-minute long video or the 20-minute long video. So how many people does it take to amend the U.S. Constitution? Would you believe it to be 10 million people? Or less? I think a lot less if we use good strategy. We'll go over that strategy a little bit. So, what needs to happen to amend the Constitution? Article 5 right now. We want to change this. I'll put a proposal out there near the end of the, or in the video a little bit to change it. But right now it's 30 state legislatures need to propose an amendment, and 38 states legislatures need to ratify the amendment. So we're going to target 38 states, the least populated states. 30 of them needs to propose it, and 38 needs to ratify it. Now, these are not governors or the court system. These are state legislatures. So 38 state legislatures need to do it. Now, a simple majority, 51% of each of the 38 state legislatures are needed to vote to propose and then to ratify the U.S. constitutional amendment. Very important to know that only 66 million Americans, or 21% of Americans, live in a slight majority of the districts of the 38 least populated states. Let me state that again. 21% of Americans live in enough state legislative district seats needed to amend the Constitution. 20 million people in 2018 voted within these districts. That's 6% of the population of America voted in 2018 in 51% of the districts of the 38 least populated states. So, we don't target California, Texas, New York, or Florida. We don't target Illinois, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Georgia, North Carolina, Michigan, New Jersey, or Virginia. Those are the 12 most populated states. Those states right there have about 60% of the U.S. population. 40% of the U.S. population live in the 38 least populated states. Let's get that straight again. 40% of Americans live in 38 states. 60% of Americans live in 12 states. So you see that you can cut out 60% of the people already. And then what you're going to do is cut away half of each of the 38 states. Cut each state in half, and you target 51% of each of the states. We don't worry about the other 49% of the state. We don't worry about the 12 most populated states. That takes away 60%. We don't worry about 49% of the states. We put all our people, all our efforts in 51%. So, this is the 2016 turnout. 57 million people voted in 2016. But only 40 million people voted in these 38 states in 2018. So we're going to target the 2018 off-year election. So the next one like that would be 2022 or 2026. I say we, I'll say we a lot, but nefarious forces, definitely not me. I want to do this in a manner that improves our Constitution, gives us more liberty and free enterprise, makes it more, change the amendment process using the amendment process to make it a lot more difficult. We don't want 10 to 15 million people to be able to amend our Constitution. We want a good 70% of Americans to buy off on an amendment process. And I have a way of doing that. We'll get to that in a little bit. So we're going to concentrate on 38 states. That's 40 to 60 million voters, depending on turnout. We're going to concentrate on half the districts. That's 20 to 30 million voters, depending on the turnout. Each election, you only need a 51% majority to win that election. That's 10 million voters in 2018. A little bit over 10 million voters. Obviously, we want a margin of error. We want to target probably 55 districts. Obviously, we want to make sure we got the margin of errors in there. So we're going to be 11 to 12 million people to really truly do this. So we're going to move people. We're not just going to try to motivate the people who live there already, even though that's part of it. That could be part of the strategy for sure. But we're going to move people. We're going to take people from California, Florida, New York. We're going to probably target people ages 18 to 25, making low wage right now. And I'll get to that in the strategy section. But let's just talk about, we're going to be moving people to these districts. So, 2,725 state legislative districts is what we're targeting. That's how many people, elected officials, we need to get in office, motivated or dedicated to passing a certain amendment to get that amendment passed. That's all you need. It seems like a large number, but in a big way, it's a small number. These are state legislative district seats. These are not congressmen. These are not U.S. senators. These are state senators, state delegates, or whatever they're called in your state in the lower house, lower legislative district house. Okay, so let's target 2,000 just for a margin of error. These overlap, by the way. So let's just talk about the 2,000 lower house district seats. Small margin of error there. We're probably a little bit larger than that. Probably 2,200 really lower house just to get a good margin of error because we'll miss a few. 745 Senate seats. Well, if we target about 2,200, we're going to have probably closer to 850. We're going to have a margin of error for the state Senate as well. But let's just talk about 2,000. What can we do with 2,000 districts? Well, we can move 5,000 people per 2,000 districts. That's 10 million people. So we get 10 million people dedicated to helping. That's 12,500 per state Senate or 5,000 for the lower house. That's per 2,000 districts. In 2018, all these states averaged about 10,000 voters, so 5,000 to win. Again, 5,001 votes wins when 10,000 people vote altogether. So a simple majority. So we'll get into some of the strategy to understand why this is an overwhelming number. Okay, primaries. First, you take a Democrats and Republicans and separate them. And then you have a lot lower turnout for primaries. Historical numbers are historical numbers. So 20 million people voted within these districts. In primaries, it's much lower. About 3 million people vote in either the Republican primary or the Democrat primary. So a much lower turnout for the primaries. So 1,500 people will win. 3,000 people will vote in these primaries on average. These are competitive primaries. I looked in Kansas and a few others, and you get this kind of turnout here. If you look at the percentage and do the math, 1,500, I mean, it's a good competitive primary in Kansas. I forget the candidates right now. You can look that up. You can look up how many votes each one got. But 1,500 per district was needed to win. And we'll go over a couple case studies in a little bit. That's 1% of Americans. 3.3 million people spread across 2,000 districts is almost 1,700 per district. Now, I use the word average big time because some of these legislative district seats have very low population and other ones significantly higher population. Some states have like 400 legislative districts in their lower house. Other ones have 40 or 50. Some have higher populations in the state, some have lower population in the states. But these are averages. So we're going to put, where I say put in 5,000 per district, some will only get 1,000 or 2,000. Some will get 7,000 or 8,000. We're talking about averages right now, because every state's going to be so different. Okay. So 1% or 3.3 million people will give enough voters, almost 1,700 per district, and the people who win with about 1,500. So this will win primaries. 1% or 3.3 million Americans could win most primaries in the legislative districts needed to amend the U.S. Constitution. How important is that for every American to know? To realize how nefarious forces could take 10 or 3.3 million people and just cause havoc in the primaries around this nation and get their people in there and winning, especially if they're lying to you, running on a normal Republican or Democrat platform, but in reality they're going a little bit more extreme. So let's go over the numbers one more time. 1%, 3.3 million people, enough to win most primaries. 2%, that gives you the total vote on the primaries. Double what you need to win a primary. It starts making you competitive in the general election. You could probably win enough legislative district seats with 6.7 million Americans. 2% of all of Americans. You can probably win enough. But I started off this video saying 10 million people. That's 3% of Americans. 3 times what you need to win a primary. And enough to win the general elections in the 2018 elections. So we're going to move 10 million people into these 2,725 districts. Again, there are 2,000 in the lower house, and that overlaps with the state senates. So the strategy is that we run as Democrats or Republicans on normal platforms. So let's go over some of the bad amendments that might come out. There's 1,000 of them. What's some of them more worrisome? What if somebody ran on gun control? And most people think that just means background checks or getting rid of some of the more dangerous assault weapons or whatever. But they use normal language, what I'm saying. And a lot of politicians get voted in running on gun control. But what they keep secret is that they're going to repeal the Second Amendment and replace it with a 100% gun ban. It's pretty radical. Could it happen? Could you get enough people to move? Could we get 10 million people to move? To say, come support gun control. Move to this district. Help us flip this district. Yeah, you could. 2 or 3% of the American population want gun control easily and are willing to sacrifice to move on their own, fund their own move. Even if maybe people could pay them to do some of that move. But definitely you can get 3% of the American population to do that. There's a lot more than a few percentage points of the Americans that want climate change addressed. So let's say you run as a Democrat or even a Republican and say that we should address climate change. But you use the same language as everybody else. But when you get in there, you do an actual amendment banning all fossil fuels. And that's pretty darn radical. That would devastate our economy, devastate our way of living, standard of living, and quite frankly, I think would do tremendous harm to our environment. That's another subject we can get into. Or what if you're just a Democrat who just says, I want simple, we want to go a little bit more socialized medicine or whatever. But when they get in there, they literally vote for an amendment for highly significant or full socialism in the amendment to the U.S. Constitution, requiring everybody to get health care, housing, food, all paid for by the government. That is overwhelmingly destructive to the economy and destructive to the American poor. What about open immigration? What if China sent over 15 to 30 million people? China currently has about 1.4 billion people. 1% of China is 15 million people, maybe 14 million people. China could very easily pay $1,000 per Chinese communist, take their most loyal communist, to come over here, act normal, open immigration. They start shipping in boats of 4,000 or 5,000 per boat, shipping back and forth, having about 10 or 15, let's say 100 boats coming across, keep on coming across, dumping more people in, having buses take people to Idaho, North Dakota, Alaska, wherever. All these, they have a plan put together. And they ship 15 million people in. And they try not to cause suspicion, but obviously there will be some people suspicious. But you say it's conspiracy theorist. They don't let people know. And they don't even let the 20 million Chinese people know who are communists. They just know that they should be voting for that Chinese sympathizer. The Chinese person going up there. Only the leaders, only those about 3,000 people or so need to really know what amendment they're going to be passing. And they're the most loyal communist from China. But they're going in there and overwhelming with numbers to these legislative district seats. China has about $1 trillion right now or over that in U.S. debt. They could pull 10% of that out and have well over $100 billion. Well, 30 million people getting $1,000 per month, which is enough for Chinese people. They live on a very low standard of living right now. But $1,000 a month, that's only, for 30 million people, that's $30 billion. China only needs to do this for 3 or 4 months. That's $90 billion. So they can give them $2 billion, $2 or $3,000 per month. Have 4 or 5 people living in a small apartment. It doesn't cost that much is what I'm trying to say. And China has plenty of money to do it. Then all of a sudden China says we're going to pass an amendment where China has, or the Chinese people who came over here now are American voting citizens, then votes for full communism or votes for the dictator of China in an amendment that the dictator of China is now the dictator of America, legally changing our constitution. Well, what if the 1.5 billion Muslims around the world, now Muslims around the world are a little bit more radical than the Muslims in America, but let's say we take 1%, 15 million Muslims, of the most radical, jihadist, hostile to America, who want Sharia law, who are dedicated to getting Sharia law, dedicated to taking over America. They come over here through open immigration. 15 million of them. They go to the right places. They can live off a low standard of living. They're living off their dedication to their faith, dedication to getting Sharia law. It's not it's not outside the realm of possibility for them to do it if they start getting the strategy. Then they pass an amendment saying that we live under Sharia law, that all of Americans, any leader needs to be a imam, a Muslim leader, all the judges, all the governors, all the mayors, the president. They take over our military might. So America's wealth and military might is an enormous prize. I mean, and do we really want somebody to spend $100 billion? China spends, what, a couple $100 billion right now for the military. Instead of spending $100 billion on the military, spend $100 billion one time sending people over here and take all of our military. Now, would we fight back? Yes. Would we go against our own Constitution and have a revolution against our own Constitution? Yes. Will our military people let China just be in charge? No. But legally, they're in charge. We would have to break our own Constitution and have a revolution. That's a huge mess. Can be a very bloody mess. A lot of deaths to try to fight against that. Shouldn't we try to secure our Constitution? Americans own America. We should not give it up by open immigration. We should not give it up by a small fringe of 2, 3, 4% of Americans taking control and amending our Constitution, the foundations of our government. So what's the solution? We want a solution where 70% of Americans need to agree on an amendment. So instead of 10, 20, 30 million Americans deciding what our Constitution should be, it's going to require well over 200,000 people to amend our Constitution. I have one on my website that talks about how we can get representative groups together where everybody joins a representative group dedicated to amending the Constitution or protecting the Constitution from bad amendments. But you need these groups with 70% of Americans collectively, proportionally coming up to vote to amend the Constitution, which means you're not going to get the bad ones. You're going to have a huge 70% of Americans buying off on the constitutional amendment. So much more difficult. 230 million people need to buy off on this, not just 5, 10, 20, or even 30 million people buying off, but 200 million people. It's a way of doing it, a way of securing it. The next idea, we have competitive representative agencies. On my website, I call them competitive regulatory agencies, but they're also competitive representative agencies, and they're much better representation of the people compared to our current representatives. Congressmen, state senators, state delegates, they should not be called representatives. They really should not. It's a very, very poor method of representing the people. On my website, I'm not going to get into competitive regulatory agencies right now, but it's significantly better for representation. Look at that idea. Pockets of Freedom deals with foreign policy and immigration. So we know that there are people around the world who are in massive poverty because of the oppressive nature of their country, where they live under oppression of physical force coming against them, of dying and raping and just really bad lives in certain countries. And we know they need a place to escape. Europe took a lot of people in, America's taken a lot of people in, and it's doing a lot of harm in some of these places. We can look at how many people California took in from Mexico, and they're voting for a much more socialized California. we see in Europe and some places that took a lot of Muslims in and having a very difficult time, and some negative externalities come in with that. Pockets of freedom is a way for our military to protect this land outside of American soil, and allow people to migrate there, and they have free enterprise in there. Go look at that video. I'm not going to get far into that right now. But let's go over some of the strategy. So the reason I say we target 2018, 2022 off years is because a lot more state legislative districts get elected then. 87 of the 99 state legislative chambers held regularly scheduled elections for 6,073 seats. 82% of all state legislative seats. That's why we target the off-year elections, just because we have a lower turnout, so we don't need as many people, and because we have the more legislative districts are done that time frame. So, a case study from Kansas. 204,000 people is what Kansas will get out of the 10 million. New citizens packed into 55%. I want a good margin of error. That gives 3,000 voters, new citizens, new voters, into each of the 68 districts. So we target 68 districts out of the 125. We want a margin of error. We're going to miss a few. So we target a lot. But what could 3,000 people do? Kansas has smaller margins. I know we talked about 5,000, but they have 125 districts. So you don't get as many per district, but the population. Now in Kansas, you had a lot less. You had 6,000 people per district voting in 2018. So 3,000 to win. So, or even a little bit less than that because I packed them into 55 districts. Okay. In the primary in Kansas House District 113, just as a case study, Greg Lewis won with 2,500 votes. So 3,000 new citizens can overwhelm that. Now, he won it with 6,000 votes in the general election, but we took him out in the primaries. In District 89, this Democrat won with 5,500 votes, unopposed. But I'm not sure what happened to the slide here. But in the primary, 3,000 votes overwhelmed this person in the primary. Let's look at this District 45. You had Democrats and Republicans vying for their primaries. Again, we're going to put 3,000 new people in here. You can choose a Democrat or a Republican. The Democrat got 1,600 votes. The Republican got 1,400 votes to win their primaries. So 3,000 people, you pick which one you want to go with, and you overwhelm that primary. Now, Mike Amax, he got 1,600 votes, and he got 10,000 in the general. So 3,000 might not win the general, but you took him out in the primary. So, and I think this was a higher turnout. So, what we want to do here is we want to find backers with 50 to 100 billion dollars to do this, because we want to pay people to move. Now, some things you can just pay them to, and you're motivated to move because you're so invested in gun control or climate change or the like, or want socialism. So you're going to get people to move on their own and pay for their own way. But paying people to move, or paying for buses, paying for some of the organization, 50 to $100 billion could get you there easily. And in politics, 50 to $100 billion is not necessarily out of the question, especially if you know an amendment's going to come out of this and really get you what you want. So what we're going to do is set up 2,000 organizations, one per district. And they'll coordinate the state senates as well. If you give 2,000 districts $1 million each, that's only $2 billion. Again, we were targeting $50 to $100 billion to get funded for this. But this is for organizational purposes, to buying some buses, to start busing people in to register to vote. We'll go over some of the strategy in a minute. But, I'm sorry. Could Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, Michael Zuckerberg, Michael Bloomberg, Charles Koch, David Koch, Tom Steyer pay for some of this? I know I went from $50 billion down to Tom Steyer's $1.6 billion. But even $1.6 billion can do a tremendous amount with this. David and Charles Koch, big-time libertarians. They really wanted to use their money correctly. Right now they're funding some think tanks out there, funding some organizations funding some organizations that are libertarian in nature. But what if they use their money more strategically and took billions of dollars and did this method? Or Michael Bloomberg, who is putting billions of dollars for gun control right now. What if he used this method? $62 billion, or I think he has $55 billion. I hear $60 billion. Instead of running for president in the Democrat primary right now, what if he just put all of his money into the efforts? $55 billion is a lot to put into it. Okay, so strategy. We're going to keep your bad amendment ideas secret or very vague. Hey, I want climate change to be addressed. I want gun control. I want normal gun control. But you do a lot more radical when you're getting there. When you get in there. Full socialism. Hey, China, we should have better relationship with China. Who's going to complain about better relationship with China? But when they actually get in there and vote, it's a full communism. Or the dictator is in charge, or effectively in charge. So what they need to do with the enemy, or the bad nefarious forces, or we as people who want good amendments to be passed, they can scream about 5,000 candidates who are really motivated and start paying them a good salary and train these people up tremendously, have them write well, go out there and campaign, make speeches, get them known within their community for 4 or 5 years on normal Republican or Democrat policies. So you're not raising so much suspicion from these people. So you groom a whole bunch of local candidates as well that are willing to do what you need to do, and I'll discuss that in a minute. So we need to find possible candidates with a long history of good reputation, and we're going to create good reputations. Okay, you want to take over local governments. With this number of people, local governments are won with a very small number of votes. So this number of votes can overwhelm the local elections. You want to be in charge of zoning, registrar's office. You want to take over the sheriff's office. You want to take over the city councils and judges and others. Now, what could these people do? Let's go over a couple of them. The registrar's office. You start registering people. Let's say you're not looking at people's ID well. You're letting people in that you shouldn't. You're giving people more of the benefit of the doubt than the law allows. And the city council is on your side as well. The court's on your side as well. The judges are on your side as well. And people say, well, that's not legal. Well, you got enough of the power of government. Who is in charge? You're in charge of the DA because you got your DA elected. If they don't take the elected officials and elected judges and elected zoning and elected registrar's office, if they're not taking action to correct the illegal actions within your strategy, well, then it happens. There's nobody to prosecute. And maybe a U.S. attorney can prosecute somebody. But if you don't make it obvious, they're not coming in. And maybe you make it obvious and you take over some U.S. attorney office as well. But that's a little bit different. A lot of times they don't even have jurisdiction. Okay, let's just keep on going. But you take over some of these local offices and it makes it a lot more difficult to enforce some of the laws, or you make zoning laws. So right now you might not be able to put 10 people in one house, 10 new voters in one house. Well, you can if you change the zoning. Every state has ways for homeless to vote. So you just say that you're homeless. You come in on a bus. Hey, my shelter is I'm homeless. My shelter is over there. You give the address of the local homeless shelter. You check in. You hire the people at the homeless shelter to write your name in on a weekly basis to show that you're homeless. So you want to pick the right districts. You don't want to pick people with strong incumbents. You don't want to pick people with good political machinery. You want to pick the weaker incumbents. So you have 50% or maybe 55% that you want to target. Don't target everybody. Don't target just half the state geographically. Spread them out a little bit so people don't have to move but so far to get to your district. So people come from one district can say my address is over here, and they can show residency over there by showing up once every couple days or whatever. Make election laws so the losers of primaries cannot run in the general. Highly important. That's state legislation that can do that. A lot of states have somewhat of a laws like that, but you can strengthen those laws once you get some of your people in there. And that way you can start moving some of your people out, because you only need to win the primary. Move people to your other. Once you get these people won, and those laws put into place, you move your people to a different state. Or not all of them, but some of them, because you don't need as many people at that point. So that's a huge strategy point right there. Move in before redistricting. So every 10 years, they have redistricting. Attack one of the states before, get enough people to draw the lines and use your strategy on redistricting. And you're drawing district maps. Gerrymandering was what I'm talking about. So you move your people where they are needed, even if you have to move them again and again and again. There's no law saying that you can't live in this area on 1 year and then this state or district in another year. Obviously that happens all the time. You don't have organizations moving people and directing people, but there's no law saying that you can't direct people. And if there is laws like that, well, who's going to enforce them if you have a lot of the local or state legislative seats? You're taking over the governor's seats by primary. Okay, move your people for just several months. Again, you don't have to move them January through December. A lot of times the primaries are in September or August. You move in 30 days before, right before the cutoff time. You register to vote. You're paying people only to stay there for a few months, and they go back home for vacation for 2 months, come back and vote in the general. So it's not like people have to live there. You can go register to vote, say your residency is there, or I'm back to visit my mom and my family in this state or whatever. So you bus people in, register to vote, they ship them back home, say you're on vacation. Or if you have to go back to establish residency, you go back, you bus back into established residency for a while within the laws. The laws stating that you must live where you are registered to vote are rarely monitored or enforced. We don't see a lot of monitoring or enforcing of that. So let's keep on going. Take over the local government where that law enforcement happens. So again, if you're in charge of the sheriff's office, you're in charge of a lot of these things, you're not going to enforce it anyway because you're in charge of it. You have your people in there. So you're going to buy buses to bring people to register to vote. So that'd be an expense, but it's not that big of an expense. 2 or 3 buses per district is enough to take care of that. $1 million per district in a small states can organize, advertise, and put candidates in a great position. Again, you're going for normal boilerplate Republican platform or Democrat platform. You're not going to sound extreme, even though your amendment will be more extreme. You get in there and you lie. you don't tell the truth. You keep it secret. Or you can even say, I'm not lying. I told you I was going to want to address climate change. But they didn't tell you they're going to go full fossil fuel ban. Oh, I told you I wanted more socialism. Well, you didn't tell me you're going to go full communism. Hey, I told you I wanted more gun control. Well, you didn't tell me you're going to do a full repeal of the Second Amendment and do a 100% gun ban. I thought you were just going to do a background checks and get rid of some of the more extreme weapons. Well, you see what I'm going at. So, are you legally allowed to pay people to move for a few months? Well, you have some of these organizations, some of these rich people, hey, they establish a makeshift business, a temporary business for 3 months in this area. So you move there, you actually work and make some of the money. Maybe you don't make enough money, but it defrays the cost. Again, if you pay somebody $1,000 a month, and a lot of minimum wage jobs don't get paid but $1,000 a month, to 10 million people, again, target 18 to 25-year-olds, and a lot of these people, and working part of the time. If you're working part of that time, maybe you can defray all this cost, but at least you can defray most of it. And again, only for a couple months. And what if they're organizing during that time, but they're cutting grass and they're doing other stuff and they're working in different areas. They get with other businesses or are like-minded, and they work some of these people. So maybe they lose money in their businesses, yes, but it defrays the cost. Move for a month, register to vote, and move back. Bus people in and out. We talked about that a little bit. Make makeshift businesses to defray the cost. We talked about that. Team up with like-minded business owners to work people, thus defraying the cost. Again, you might not be able to defray all the costs because there's makeshift businesses, they're temporary businesses. But maybe you can defray all of the cost and make a little bit of money on the businesses. I don't know. But your big idea is you're willing to put the money in to have people live out there for a while. Or they can go back and work back at home. And just go back and forth just for establishing residency, going back and forth to vote and the like. China could ship over 30 million people, 2% of their most loyal communists. 2% of their people, the most loyal communists they have, 30 million people, overwhelm. Again, 20 million people voted in 2018. They shipped 30 million people over. Even if every American who normally votes in 2018 switched to fighting these people, and that'd be unlikely because they're going to keep it secret. Hey, I just want better relations with China. And they go vote for somebody who really goes extreme in the amendment once they get elected. And they make us go full communism. But 30 million people, it only costs $30 billion to give every one of them $1,000 a month. Most Chinese live on a lot less than $1,000 a month. That's a big raise to a lot of people. And you pile people in a small apartment, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people into an apartment. It doesn't take that much to do. Okay, let's keep on going. The Islamic population, again, 30 million people, the 2% most extreme, radical Islamic extremists. We're talking people who hate America, who want, and I call extremist anybody who wants full Sharia law. But even if you don't want to call them extremists, but if they want Sharia law, I certainly don't. Most Americans don't. The vast majority of Americans don't. But there's 1.5 billion Muslims in the world. At least 2% want full Sharia law and would love to take over America. A lot of Muslims around the world, not so much within America, but around the world, hate America and want America to be Sharia law. They could do that if we had open immigration and require full Sharia law once they get past an amendment saying, hey, we require full Sharia law. The Sharia law is now our constitution. Amend the constitution, replacing the whole thing with Sharia law. And the only person that can have a position of power is imams. All women are subjects to the most radical Islamic beliefs. They're stoned to death and the like. You know, what some of the most radical people do. Not the normal Muslim, but the most radical. So, 30 million people overwhelms any general election in these 2,725 districts. That's overwhelming. The dangers of open immigration. Again, China or the Muslim population, 1-2% just overwhelms us. If you do it with strategy, not just here's some in California, here's some in Texas, here's some wherever, and all spread across. But if they use strategy, go for the 38 states, goes for half of each state. After the Great Migration, we talked about this. China dictator is in control of America. How hard would that be? Muslims in charge. Okay, let's go back to the 1970s during the Cold War. The Soviet Union definitely had enough people, if we had open immigration, to send over here. It'd be a very small percentage of their population. Now they're in charge of our U.S. military. We're part of the USSR. How easy would it have been for the USSR to send over enough people to vote for representatives in the state legislative district seats needed to amend the Constitution, and the amendment is simply the Soviet Union is a member state of the USSR, controlled by, what was it, Lenin and Gorbachev and the like. Americans currently bombing people in the Middle East, Afghanistan, Iraq. Certainly there's enough people over there who hate us, who hate Americans, who can come over here and vote for some pretty radical amendments to say that they're in charge in some way, shape, or form. North Korea and Iran are both openly hostile to America. Other places as well. Can we really trust Putin not to meddle in our election? How easy is it for Putin right now to send enough people over and say, oh, we took you over, you're part of Russia now, by amendment, legal amendment. Instead of paying hundreds of billions of dollars for their military, they spend $100 billion once for 1 year, send their people over here. By amendment, all of our military might has to go over to Russia. They take all our aircraft carriers and our satellites and nuclear weapons. They're in charge. Obviously, we would fight back. We would go against our own constitution because it was legitimately amended through the amendment process, but because we allowed open immigration. So, let's go over this real quick. There's about 7.8 billion people in the world. The best numbers they have, I guess. 1/5 of 1% of that. 1/5 of 1% is 15 million people. Well, obviously, some of the most poorest people in the world would love to come here and say, give me some of your wealth. Pass an amendment to give me $100,000 a year and let me move into anybody's house I want to by constitutional amendment. Obviously, you would have to do some amendments properly, but they can do some pretty darn awful amendments. These people are living in desperate straits right now. Certainly there's less than certainly over 1% of the world's population hates us and wants to be in charge of us. We allow open borders in a democracy. We freely allow the foreign enemies to become voting owners of America as well as the current Americans. So if we allow open borders in a democracy and they start registering to vote, we freely allow them, the foreign enemy, to become voting owners as well. We allow our enemies to overwhelm us in numbers. Again, 2 or 3% is all they need of American citizens. Maybe 4 or 5%. If we see enough foreigners come in, we might turn against them and really try to fight against them. But by the time they get up to that 6%, to the 30 million people or whatever, we're overwhelmed. If we came together all together and try to fight against them, they still overwhelm those districts. We allow our enemies an easy tactic. Milton Friedman was famous for stating that you cannot have open borders with a significant welfare state. Well, I should become famous for stating that you cannot have open borders in a democracy and weak protections of the U.S. Constitution. How many people are out there stating this strategy of how easy it is if we had open borders to do this? Now, this is not about anybody's race, color, creed, or religion. We're not talking about economics. I'm not even worried about the economics of people coming in, even if a lot of low-skilled wage people coming in. Let's not even get into the economics of it, the morality, the culture change. I'm just talking about they come in and say they're in charge by U.S. constitutional amendment. We might be able to make those arguments at another time. But America is a melting pot of every race, of every country, of every religion, and we should be. But if we allow open immigration, we allow our enemies of our country to come in and just say they're in charge, to take our wealth, take our military might, to imprison us, to make us subjects, to make us slaves by constitutional amendment. Gun rights are climate change billionaires, and we know Tom Steyer is a climate change billionaire. Michael Bloomberg is a gun rights billionaires. They have enough money to pay people to move, to relocate for several months. Now, these are my big amendment things again. So we already went over that. I'm not going to go over that again. So here's 53 minutes for this video here. Pass it around. Understand that we need to secure our Constitution with a simple amendment to how we amend our Constitution. So we amend Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution. That's amendment clause. So it sounds kind of strange to amend how we amend the Constitution, but we should. So we use Article 5 to amend Article 5 to require 70% of Americans buying off on any amendment. And we're not going to get so many amendments because it takes well over 230 or so million Americans out of the 330 million Americans. So even if 5 or 10, we don't have to worry about 5 or 10 or 20 million people coming in from another country. They're not going to be able to affect our Constitution that much. Now, we don't want 100 million, 200 million people coming in from another country. So we still don't want open borders. We want immigration, legal immigration, yes. But we should be afraid of the amendment process right now. Let's at least secure it. So a small number of people cannot change it. Whether it's people within this country or outside forces. So this is not necessarily an immigration debate or an immigration issue. But if we allow open immigration, our Constitution is not protected. Until the next video.